Tutankhamun's spectacular treasures. Now, for the first time since they were discovered, all 5,398 objects are being brought together in a new $1 billion museum. This will be the first time many of them have been seen for a century.
Look at the horse, look at the horse, look at the horse.
Scientists have been using the latest imaging and forensic technology to unlock long-buried mysteries, to reveal the man behind the mask.
So many tiny details are visible again.
This wasn't just a haul of treasure, it was a veritable arsenal.
Not of a boy king, but a warrior on a global stage. Egypt's spectacular Tutankhamun. He's the most famous, most studied pharaoh in history. But even today, Tutankhamun's treasures still have much to reveal. Now, the most comprehensive forensic examination of all Tutankhamun's 5,000 treasures is underway. And several key objects have captured experts' attention. At the heart of the investigation, a mysterious dagger found on Tutankhamun's mummified body. Priceless golden chariot decorations, painstakingly reconstructed after resting in fragments for 3,500 years. And the leather remains of a strange armored tunic. These three treasures will tell us much more about the real Tutankhamun. Not as a boy, but as a warrior. It's a new chapter in a story that began in the Valley of the Kings on the afternoon of November 26, 1922. In the barren desert, west of the Nile, British archaeologist Howard Carter made the greatest archaeological discovery of all time. The almost completely intact tomb of an ancient Egyptian pharaoh, Tutankhamun. Egyptologist Dr. Chris Naunton has been given a rare chance to get up close to Howard Carter's personal account of the momentous discovery.
This is Howard Carter's journal, and it's amazing for me to see this because it really is as close as you can get to the very moment that Carter looked on this incredible haul of objects for the very first time.
This meticulously handwritten entry records Carter's astonishment as he peered inside the tomb, becoming the first person to gaze on its wonders for 3,500 years.
It says, the interior of the chamber gradually loomed before one with its strange and wonderful medley of extraordinary and beautiful objects heaped upon one another. When Lord Carnarvon said to me, "Can you see anything?" I replied to him, "Yes, it is wonderful."
Tutankhamun's treasures captivated the world. In the months and years following their discovery, they were painstakingly excavated and transferred to the Cairo Museum. Since then, millions of visitors have marveled at many of the items found in Tutankhamun's tomb. These iconic treasures paint a picture of a pampered boy king who died tragically young. This is the Tutankhamun every school child knows. A boy too young to rule, an emotionally and physically weak puppet ruler. But this image is based on the tiny handful of Tutankhamun's treasures on display in the Cairo Museum that make up just a fraction of the 5,000 objects found in Tutankhamun's burial chamber. the rest have been locked away in the museum's basement. Until now. The new Grand Egyptian Museum is now gathering together all of Tutankhamun's treasures with the aim of putting the whole collection on display for the first time since their discovery in 1922. The treasures in these boxes will shed new light on the story of Tutankhamun. Thousands of objects were simply packed away when they were first unearthed and have never been studied or analyzed. But now, in the cutting-edge labs and storerooms of the Grand Egyptian Museum, all this is about to change. Behind this unassuming door lies an Egyptologist's paradise.
Welcome in storage 93, especially for artifacts of Tutankhamun.
Filled with priceless treasures and dripping with gold. In this room, Tutankhamun's prized possessions are being brought together to be stored and conserved in climate-controlled conditions.
There's some boats, staffs, there are beds.
Chris Naunton is one of a tiny handful of experts to gain entry.
This is a super exciting moment to be here, to see all of this material being ready for exhibition in the new museum. It's once in a lifetime kind of chance to see this.
The last time these treasures were together was inside Tutankhamun's tomb. Professor Salima Ikram believes it's only now, by seeing the treasures together, that Egyptologists can begin to tell the full story of the pharaoh's life.
There is so much material in the tomb of Tutankhamun. It's really a bit like an attic where, you know, people's mothers have put all of their bits and pieces so that they have their memories, they have their entire life encapsulated from babyhood onwards. And Tutankhamun's tomb is like opening up his attic and being able to see inside his past life.
Seen together, Tutankhamun's treasures are now painting a radical new portrait. Not the boy king as many had thought. This is Tutankhamun, the warrior king.
Inside the tomb, Howard Carter found 6 chariots, 7 throw sticks, 4 daggers, dozens of bows, hundreds of arrows, 8 shields, and a unique and sophisticated set of armor. So this wasn't just a haul of treasure, it was a veritable arsenal of weapons.
But these weren't the toys of a boy king. It would seem they were the weapons of a man.
People romantically call Tutankhamun the boy king, and that's because he came to the throne when he was 9.5. But he died when he was about 19, and by the age of 14 in ancient Egypt you were a man. So really, it's more of a romantic myth calling him the boy king, because he really was a proper, truly grown-up king.
Today, this king's story is being rewritten by the artifacts he took to the afterlife. And there's one treasure Tutankhamun seems to have highly valued. Tucked away in a corner of the Cairo Museum lies a small dagger with a big secret. The latest technology has revealed startling new information about this weapon, soon to be moved to the Grand Egyptian Museum. Information that is out of this world. The sheer scale of Tutankhamun's treasures is breathtaking. From golden effigies, to elaborate beds, to simple items of clothing. But Tutankhamun was also buried with an arsenal of weapons.
Just drawer after drawer after drawer, all containing arrows.
Yes.
This entire section,
Yes.
just for this one kind of object. It's amazing.
In this second millennia BC stockpile, there's one weapon that Tutankhamun seemed to have highly treasured. Since its discovery, this spectacular dagger has been on display in the Cairo Museum. Tucked away in a corner, passed by as visitors flock to Tutankhamun's big-ticket treasures.
Might not be the most famous object that was discovered in the tomb, but I think this dagger is one of the most interesting.
This deadly weapon contains a secret that's been hidden in plain sight for nearly a century. Now the dagger has been reanalyzed to reveal Tutankhamun as a warrior, hungry for power in this world and beyond. The dagger was found inside Tutankhamun's coffin. It was resting directly on his body.
This was one of the most important objects for Tutankhamun, it seems. It was found very close to the mummy, just above the king's abdomen.
It's clear there was something special about this dagger to Tutankhamun, and there's no doubting its beauty.
Its handle is extremely finely decorated in gold, and these bands which are inlaid with precious materials. The pommel at the end is made of rock crystal. This sheath made of beaten gold is decorated with this very intricate floral pattern.
But Tutankhamun's tomb was dripping in gold and gems. So why was this dagger buried inside his coffin on his body? What made it so precious? The answer lies in the dagger's blade.
Perhaps the most interesting aspect of it actually is the blade, which is made of iron.
Iron is one of the most common elements on Earth. But in Tutankhamun's Egypt, iron was rarer than gold.
3,500 years ago, iron was almost non-existent in Egypt. We don't get any archaeological evidence for iron smelting in this part of the world until the 6th century BC.
That's 800 years after Tutankhamun died. The iron in the dagger's blade wasn't mined or smelted in Egypt. So where did it come from? The mystery has puzzled experts since the dagger's discovery nearly a century ago. But until recently, there was no way to know where the iron in the blade came from without destroying it. Now, thanks to the use of advanced non-destructive X-ray analysis, curators can shed new light on this ancient mystery. Because there's more than iron in this blade.
This technique allows us to see the kind of unique chemical fingerprint of the blade of this dagger. And crucially, it tells us the percentage of the various different elements.
Iron occurs in nature, mixed with other elements. And this mixture is unique to each source of the metal. By identifying the blade's unique chemical fingerprint, the curators have been able to pinpoint its origin.
So just we need everyone to move away for 3 meters, please, for health and safety, because we are now going to run the X-ray.
The machine fires high-energy X-rays into the dagger blade. And it's the energy reflected back that reveals the elements contained inside.
Okay, it's done. So what we have now is the result of X-ray test. And we can see the elements here of the chemical composition. And we can see now 3 peaks, which of the iron and nickel and cobalt.
Okay.
What the curators found was the proportion of nickel was unusually high.
What does this tell us about the kind of iron that was used to make this dagger?
I mean, this kind of chemical composition is not found on the smelted iron found in Egypt or even in this planet.
There's no match on Earth for the iron in this dagger.
If this iron doesn't come from this planet, where does it come from?
It's only coming from the meteorite.
From a meteorite?
Meteorite, yes.
The iron in Tutankhamun's dagger is extraterrestrial. Its journey began thousands, perhaps millions of years ago. From the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, 250 million miles away, a lump of rock and metal plummeted faster than a bullet toward Earth. It slammed into the planet's surface, shattering into fragments of molten iron. Somewhere in the sands of Africa, these fragments lay for thousands, even millions of years, until they were found and collected to be melted, forged and crafted into an object of rare beauty and power. The iron in this dagger has been on an extraordinary journey. Egyptologist Aidan Dodson believes Tutankhamun knew this iron fell from the heavens.
About 1,500 or 2,000 years earlier than Tutankhamun, they talk about iron from the sky as being a somewhat miraculous material. The iron has a power, it's from the gods.
To Tutankhamun, the dagger must have seemed like a gift from the gods. Now, another hidden set of artifacts, not seen in their original glory for 3,500 years, are shedding new light on Tutankhamun's ambition. A unique combination of images that display him as a powerful ruler of not just Egypt, but the world. Tutankhamun took 6 chariots to the afterlife, carefully dismantled and stacked in his tomb's antechamber. When Howard Carter discovered the tomb, he found at least 1,500 tiny gold flakes under the chariot. He didn't have the technology to deal with these bewildering metal fragments, so he put them in a box in the hope that someone in the future might. Now, decades later, these gold fragments have been finally reassembled. World-renowned gold conservator Dr. Christian Ekman has been piecing the flakes together. His work reveals a series of stunning images that show Tutankhamun at the center of the world.
So many tiny details are visible again, which were not visible when they were excavated.
Ekman discovered these gold fragments are parts of golden panels, once used as decorations on the harnesses and trappings of Tutankhamun's chariots. These bewildering, fragile jigsaw puzzles have so far taken 3 years to piece together.
So every single piece which we could reattach to the gold sheet is another part of a huge puzzle. But still there are missing pieces, and we try, of course, now to fix those little things, back to its original position.
Ekman has pieced together at least 70 intricately embossed gold panels, made to decorate 6 leather chariot harnesses. And they would have made a powerful impression on everyone who saw them. These images haven't been seen since the doors were sealed on Tutankhamun's tomb 3,500 years ago. For Egyptologist Professor Salima Ikram, interpreting them is an incredible privilege.
This material is fabulous because it's never been on display before, even though it is from the tomb of the most famous king, Tutankhamun.
Salima has been decoding these images, designs that reveal Tutankhamun's ambitions stretched far beyond Egypt's borders.
The Tutankhamun chariot leather is unusual because it doesn't just have normal Egyptian propaganda imagery. At first glance, you think, oh, this is just sort of animals fighting amongst themselves. But then you realize that there's a griffin involved, which is a Near Eastern animal. Some of the plants used are very much in the Syrian tradition. And then you have this running spiral, which is Aegean. So you've got this cocktail of great empires and great artistic traditions coming together.
These foreign designs were deliberately chosen to present Tutankhamun as a player on an international stage and the most powerful ruler in the ancient world.
This combination of styles seems to emphasize the fact that he wanted to show that he had very long-reaching arms of power, as it were, and he could control all sorts of places and people.
The gold decorations from the harnesses suggest Tutankhamun wanted to be seen as an international statesman. And a chariot about to be moved to the Grand Egyptian Museum shows just how far he was prepared to go in pursuit of that power.
So this chariot is going to be 3D scanned today. And so first thing that has to happen, of course, is that this case, which has been protecting it for decades, is coming off right before our eyes here.
For Egyptologist Chris Naunton, it's an amazing opportunity to examine the chariot's lavishly decorated surfaces. Before it's transported, the chariot's current condition must be rigorously analyzed.
So what's happening is that this handheld device is being used to take, in rapid succession, a whole sequence of images which are creating a digital model of the chariot. And this is incredibly important because we need to understand the condition, the shape of the chariot in its current situation so that it can then be reassessed when it goes into the new Grand Egyptian Museum.
The detailed digital model will ensure the chariot remains in exactly the same condition after it's moved.
One of the things that's just incredible about being up this close with these objects is you get a sense of the incredibly fine detail.
Few people ever get beyond the protective glass to study this chariot. So it's a rare opportunity to see just how the young pharaoh wanted the world to see him.
What we can see here is some of this utterly exquisite decoration on the inside of this chariot. It's rendered in beaten gold, and it shows a frieze of foreign captives, enemies of Tutankhamun.
But this beautiful decoration depicts graphic brutality that indicates Tutankhamun would stop at nothing in the pursuit of power.
There's a rope which runs right the way along this scene, which is binding them all. Some of them are tied by the neck, some of them have their hands behind their backs, some of them have their hands tied at their wrists and above their heads.
Their detailed features and distinctive costumes identify the captives as Egypt's traditional enemies from the south and the north.
He was trying to convey this idea of being the ruler over all of the foreign people who surrounded his country.
Armed with an iron dagger from the gods, and proclaiming his power from a chariot decorated with golden images of his international supremacy, Tutankhamun set out to dominate the ancient world. But these treasures appear to be too beautiful for the battlefield. So was all this just for show? A king playing at being a soldier? Or was it a genuine warning that Tutankhamun was a serious warrior king? Now, groundbreaking new research into a mysterious armored tunic found inside Tutankhamun's tomb could provide the answer.
It was really a state-of-art piece of military equipment.
This is the critical piece of the puzzle that could prove just how far Tutankhamun was prepared to go in pursuit of power. And it raises the possibility that Tutankhamun was willing to go to war. In the state-of-the-art labs of the Grand Egyptian Museum, ancient leather specialist Lucy Skinner has come to see one of Tutankhamun's most intriguing treasures. This unique armored vest could help prove something extraordinary. That Tutankhamun, dismissed for nearly a century as a powerless boy king, was willing to go to war.
Oh, wow.
These are the remains of Tutankhamun's personal armored tunic. It would have been an impressive and intimidating sight. Now, 3,500 years after it was entombed with Tutankhamun, and after nearly a century in storage, it's been moved to the Grand Egyptian Museum. For Lucy, it's her first opportunity to analyze the armor up close.
It's fantastic to see it like this. I've been working with ancient Egyptian leather for almost a decade, and finally I get to see this item. Actually, that piece, can you...
Nothing like it has ever been found from ancient Egypt. Lucy believes understanding how the armor was made will shed new light on why it was made and prove whether it was made for show or for battle. At least 2,000 leather scales were stitched together to overlap. Ridges prevented the scales from being forced apart. The result was flexible, resilient armor.
You can really see clearly, can't you, how the ridges on each of these scales, they're overlapping each other. If an arrow were to hit the armor, these ridges prevent it somehow from coming apart. Yes. So it gives some added protection.
Lucy believes a sophisticated manufacturing technique made the armor strong and flexible, a practical piece of equipment rather than a ceremonial showpiece. And to confirm her theory, Lucy wants to examine two similar-sized scales in detail.
So this technique is called reflectance transformation imaging. It's an imaging process where you take a series of photographs with different lighting angles, and then the shadows and the highlights from each image are amalgamated into one. And it just sort of highlights the details, the surface details, really, really, really clearly on the surface of the object. So this is really excellent. This is great. We can really see the texture on the surface.
It's the first time these scales have ever been examined in forensic detail. And Lucy immediately notices a striking similarity between the two scales.
Zoom in a little bit on the...
On the right.
These scales, they're almost exactly the same, aren't they? And the same size, the same width, the ridges are in exactly the same position. They're extremely consistent. I mean, it really suggests that they found the optimal kind of method for making these things, and then they were reproducing it again and again and again.
To Lucy, the best explanation for the scales' similarity is that they were made using a mold.
The medial ridge, you can really see that it's very defined. I mean, it strongly looks like it's been pushed with some pressure into a mold.
Molding the leather would make the scales consistent, thick, and strong. Lucy believes one reason to do that would be to make Tutankhamun's armor battle-ready.
The way the surface looks super compact like this, it definitely, this would deflect quite a large impact, I think.
Ingeniously designed and meticulously manufactured, this armor was made to withstand arrows. Lucy believes it wasn't for show, it was for battle. And Tutankhamun could have worn it on the battlefield.
It was really a state-of-art piece of military equipment. It was almost like the Kevlar vest of the ancient Egyptian world.
A real warrior facing real threat would want such advanced armor. But who was Tutankhamun planning to go to war with? Who did he feel threatened by, and why? In the storerooms of the new Grand Egyptian Museum, Egyptologist Professor Salima Ikram has found a bow belonging to Tutankhamun that pictures his worst enemies.
Golly, we've never seen this before.
It's the first time to see it.
Since its discovery nearly a century ago, this bow has been locked away in the basement of the old Cairo Museum.
This is the top of the bow because this has got the enemies of the north, and that's got the enemies of the south. The Nubians are in the south, and various Asiatics are in the north, and in fact, sometimes the Libyans as well.
Salima believes this bow was never fired in anger. It's too beautiful for the battlefield. But it's a critical clue in Tutankhamun's story because it reveals a country and a pharaoh under threat. To the south, insurgencies in the colony of Nubia threatened Egypt's supply of gold and precious goods from Africa. To the northwest, Libyan tribes made violent incursions into Egyptian territory. And in the east, the aggressive Hittite Empire advanced through Syria, ever closer to Egypt's borders.
Egypt was in turmoil. Its allies had become enemies, and the expansionist, aggressive Hittites were knocking on Egypt's door.
This is why Tutankhamun was buried with an arsenal of weapons, as well as the celestial dagger and high-tech armor. Curators at the Grand Egyptian Museum are unpacking dozens of functional bows, hundreds of arrows, shields and throw sticks. Together, they're painting a picture of Tutankhamun as a warrior king, with the hardware and the motivation to go to war. And this is forcing Egyptologists to look again at all of Tutankhamun's treasures. Even those that have been on display in the old Cairo Museum for decades. Could Tutankhamun's true identity have been hidden in plain sight? Was the warrior king in front of us all along?
So this is a box from the tomb of Tutankhamun, and it's decorated on all sides with scenes of the king in his chariot going off after the enemies.
And he's waging war using the exact same weapons that Egyptologists and scientists are analyzing at the Grand Egyptian Museum. The large bow, arrows, and armored tunic, the decorated harness, and chariot.
Have the king shown riding his chariot, and he draws this massive bow and lets fly. And all of the enemies from the south are then being hit by his arrows and are falling down at his feet. And what's nice then is, on the other side, you have a very similar thing happening, but this is for the northern enemies of Egypt. So they're, they're big bearded people from the Syria area, and they're being trampled by the king's horses. They're going to go under the wheels of the chariots. And again, Tutankhamun is loosening his bow, and off they go.
This is Tutankhamun, the warrior king, in the thick of battle, leading from the front.
You've got a sense of the landscape, and the chaos, and the heat. It's fantastic.
Since its discovery nearly a century ago, the images on this box have been dismissed as fantasy. But the weapons pictured on the box are the same as the weapons found in Tutankhamun's tomb. So if the weapons shown here were real, were these events real too? Are these violent battle scenes closer to reality than some have previously thought? Did Tutankhamun lead Egypt's armies into battle? The answer lies outside the Grand Egyptian Museum, on the banks of the Nile in Thebes, in the spectacular ruins of Luxor Temple. This was ancient Egypt's religious capital, and every pharaoh wanted to make their mark here by recycling and recarving stones from earlier buildings.
We don't have a lot of evidence for Tutankhamun's buildings, but we do have fragments here and there that suggest that he might have erected temples, and that if he did, he would have included battle scenes like this.
Today, Tutankhamun's battle carvings are scattered across the site. Pieces of a colossal, seemingly impossible, three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. Archaeologist Ray Johnson has spent 20 years painstakingly recording and digitally reassembling Tutankhamun's battle scenes, with fascinating results. The chillingly vivid details include severed hands skewered on sticks and a caged prisoner hanging from a ship's mast. Egyptologist Aidan Dodson believes these carvings are more than simply propaganda, as many have thought.
The nature of these reliefs is such that they don't appear to be stereotyped ones. They seem to be specific, and therefore I think there's a reasonable case to be made that these blocks from Luxor do report a particular campaign.
And in this campaign, Tutankhamun takes center stage.
It seems likely that the king had some direct involvement physically in these campaigns, and there's no reason to assume that the king, if he's being shown there, wasn't actually there.
Some Egyptologists now believe these shattered fragments of stone record real historical events, and that the image of Tutankhamun as a frail boy king has to be reassessed.
He wouldn't be, in that case, a kind of feeble, diseased guy who had trouble walking, couldn't possibly have participated in any sort of athletic events. Instead, we'd be looking at a kind of a young, vigorous, athletic warrior.
The celestial dagger and decorated chariot reveal a man hungry for power. The arsenal of weapons and high-tech armor suggest he was ready to fight. And the painted box and carved battle scenes are powerful evidence that Tutankhamun led his armies into battle. Together, these treasures suggest a different image of the world's most famous pharaoh, as a warrior king who may have gone to war and possibly never returned. In the labs of the new Grand Egyptian Museum, history is being re-examined, and a picture of Tutankhamun as a warrior king has emerged. A man hungry for power, protected by high-tech armor, and a magical iron dagger from the gods, leading from the front in the heat of battle. A man who died at age 19. Did the young pharaoh die in battle? Did Tutankhamun make the ultimate sacrifice? In the Valley of the Kings, inside the tomb where he was laid to rest 3,500 years ago, lies the mummified body of Tutankhamun. For 33 centuries, oils and resins have preserved his body and his secrets. For the last century, since his tomb's discovery, debate has raged over his cause of death.
There has been endless speculation about whether he had malaria, whether he had septicemia, which killed him, whether he'd been hit on the head. So really, a lot of ink has been spilt on this.
Instead, Salima believes the key to discovering what killed Tutankhamun isn't to investigate how he died, but where. And she thinks this X-ray of Tutankhamun's skull contains a clue.
Here's his skull, and this is a layer of resin, and this is a second layer of resin. So the fact that there are two different layers of resin suggests that Tutankhamun was mummified in a two-part sort of process, which is very unusual.
Mummification needed to begin within days of death.
Immediately, what you have to do is void the body of its internal organs and sometimes even the brain, because otherwise you get bacteria and you puff up and you might explode.
The two-part process may be a sign that Tutankhamun was mummified temporarily to prevent decomposition before a full mummification could take place.
It is possible that he died away from the Nile Valley, and so some form of initial mummification was carried out. It could be because he was on an expedition of some sort. Now, it could be that he was fighting some sort of campaign in the desert, not close to the Nile.
A chest X-ray reveals something even stranger.
There's something very obvious missing, because there's no heart. And the Egyptians always kept the heart in the body because you have to keep the heart in order to make a safe transition between this world and the next. The absence of the heart might suggest that whoever carried out the mummification was not as skilled as they should have been, or that Tutankhamun needed immediately attention somewhere far from where the top-class embalmers were.
The evidence suggests Tutankhamun could have died far from home. Around late 1323 BC, Egypt's armies were 750 miles from home in northern Syria, fighting their arch-enemies, the Hittites. If Tutankhamun was the warrior king that the evidence suggests, then chances are he could have been there too.
We know that Egypt was involved in military activities in northern Syria. Whether or not Tutankhamun was at the head of the armies in the depths of Syria, one can probably argue the idea that he actually was up there in Syria with the Egyptian armies seems pretty persuasive.
It's possible Tutankhamun fought and died in this campaign in a distant corner of Egypt's empire. Cut down in the prime of his life as a warrior king.
Well, perhaps Tutankhamun died just as he was leaving his mark. He'd begun to regain territory overseas which had been lost, to re-establish Egypt as the great power in the region. And, you know, who knows, if he'd lived, perhaps he would have had a great and glorious reign and his dynasty would have carried on for a long time. And history would have been very different.
As the thousands of Tutankhamun's treasures are reunited at the new Grand Egyptian Museum, many paint a picture of a young pharaoh determined to stamp Egypt's mark on the world. A celestial knife, one of his most personal and prized possessions. Newly restored gold chariot decorations depicting an international statesman, and cutting-edge body armor suggesting he was ready to go into battle for his country. Together they tell the story of Tutankhamun as a warrior, not a boy, but a man who may have made the ultimate sacrifice.